Hi, love bunnies. Chapter 9, Living Outside Your Story. That's what it's all about, having the power to live outside your story. And this is Debbie Ford's teachings. So living inside our stories guarantees us a life filled with fear and wanting. The fear tells us to watch out, to hide, and to play small so we won't be exposed. The, the wanting drives us to violate our souls, trying to grasp onto anything that might make us look or feel better. When we are wanting, when we are grasping, when we are judging ourselves or others, we can be sure we are in our stories. There is no wanting. There is only the belief in the inner knowing that everything is as it should be. By listening to our internal dialogue, and checking in with ourselves often, we will be able to distinguish at any moment whether we are inside or outside our stories. Outside the confines of our personal dramas, our internal dialogue reflects the unlimited possibilities that are available to us at every moment. Outside our stories, we are filled with feelings that reflect our highest selves rather than those that echo our lowest thoughts. We are filled with an inner knowing that says, I trust the universe will take me where I'm supposed to go. I love life. Everything is unfolding in divine order. I have enough. I am enough. I am blessed. I can do it. I believe in myself. Good for me. How can I serve you? Outside our stories, we bask in excitement, joy, abundance, openness, enthusiasm, exhilaration, trust, gratitude, awe, inner knowing, self-confidence, appreciation, respect, unconditional love, and boundless energy. Stepping out. All of us have days when our internal dialogues are more consistent with our personal dramas than our greatness. In order to step out of our stories, we first need to be able to recognize that we are in them. We need to be able to say, this is my story. These are my shadow beliefs. This is my shadow box that screams at me all day long. If when we get up in the morning, the first thing we hear from our shadow box is, you're worthless, you're never going to get what you want, or you look terrible, why don't you eat better? Most of us, instead of saying, oh, I'm in my story, just step right into it. We go for it. We bite the hook. We get enrolled. Not only do we listen to that voice, we become that voice. And instead of watching the movie, we become the star of the show. Recently, Debbie had spent time with Ethan, a 39-year-old holistic healer who shared with her how completely different he feels when he is in his story compared with when he is free from its limitations. I'm not safe in the world is the theme of Ethan's story. Intrigued, Debbie wanted to hear more. Like a lot of people, Ethan had been traveling the path to self-improvement for many years. Commitment to transforming himself, he searched high and low, learning technique after technique, trying to feel some inner safety and become more than he'd been. Ethan knew there was more inside of him than he'd been able to tap into. Frustrated by his inability to succeed in his career and in his desperate need to feel safe, Ethan numbed himself with marijuana, hoping to find there the peace and contentment he desired. Committed to breaking down the barriers that stood between the self he knew and the self he dreamed of, Ethan enrolled in Debbie's coaching program. One of the first exercises he was assigned was to identify the stories around each aspect of his life. Ethan began by examining his story around why he smokes pot. His story told him that smoking pot enhances his creativity, increases his self-confidence, but the truth was that pot distanced him from the life he had desired. His addiction separated him from both his pain and his passion. Debbie asked Ethan to identify the feelings as well as the other behaviors that live inside his story. Living inside the confines of his story, Ethan would spend hours each day stoned and fantasizing about what life could be like. He would daydream about different projects, pretend that his endless planning was actually getting him somewhere. Ethan was always getting ready to take action. But he never stepped into the arena of making it happen because he was too afraid. Inside his story, Ethan was afraid to share his dreams with people, feeling that doing so would take his momentum and his ability to manifest them. Concerned with being accepted, Ethan feared the disapproval of others who he felt might not support him in his goals. Inside his story, Ethan felt like he was small and the world was huge. On any given day, he would feel fearful, anxious, numb, angry, resigned, hopeless, and victimized. Inside his story, Ethan constantly felt unsafe, so he'd hide and try to remain unnoticed. One morning, after another night of fantasy and delusion, Ethan looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and saw a man getting old without having lived his dreams. He saw the face of a great imposter, someone who is still pretending he was on his way to success when in fact his story was going nowhere. After years of working on himself, Ethan made the decision to give up marijuana and to live outside his story. Now, standing outside his story, has been able to open his heart and feel safe exposing his feelings to those around him. Today, he shares his plans for the future with people before he even knows how to make them happen, confident that he will be guided to the right action. Outside his story, Ethan spends much less time planning and more time taking action. He is less concerned with being accepted and allows himself to try new things, whether he knows how to do it or not. Outside his story, Ethan takes care of his health, honors his body, and does not smoke pot. Ethan shared with me that he feels good enough about himself to be influential, whether he's liked or not. When he is encumbered by the limitations of his personal drama, Ethan feels connected, optimistic, creative, confident, supported, and safe in the world. Outside his story, he feels masterful. Life for him is a palette of infinite possibilities to choose from. He feels honest and authentic, powerful and productive. Most of all, he feels like he matters. Are you in or out? One of the most important steps in getting outside our stories is being able to recognize when we are living inside of them. Suzanne was a participant in a recent workshop where they had been discussing the limitations of their stories. She shared with Debbie that on the last day of the process, she had gotten up early and was sitting on the deck of her hotel room, which overlooked a beautiful bay. She told Debbie the scene could not have been more perfect and that she felt totally at peace. Sitting on a comfortable couch near the window, she opened the sliding glass door to breathe in the sea air. Suzanne decided this was the perfect setting to take in a few minutes of quiet meditation. She closed her eyes and began to breathe deeply. But within seconds, she recalled a humiliating incident that had occurred with a man some 20 years earlier. Suzanne was horrified. Her moment of peace and quiet was rudely interrupted by this memory, and soon she found herself feeling victimized, humiliated, and powerless as she replayed the incident over and over in her mind. In an instant, she was thrown right back into the middle of her story, which told her she wasn't good enough to be treated with respect. Instead of stepping back and saying to herself, "Oh, look, I'm back inside my story," she started listening to the same shadow box she had listened to thousands of times before. It wasn't long before Suzanne's mood of peace and tranquility was replaced by anger, oppression, and self-loathing. Just then, a group of ducks walked by an open sliding glass door, seemed to stop right directly in front of her room and say, "Quack, quack, quack." Suzanne opened her eyes in disbelief. It was like a message from the universe telling Suzanne that she had dropped back into her story. It was as though the ducks were mirroring her entire internal dialogue. "Boo-hoo, poor me, quack, quack, quack." She couldn't help but laugh and decided she would use the phrase "quack, quack, quack" to catch herself whenever she slipped out of the fullness of her being and back into her story. Becoming the observer. In order to transcend our dramas, we must make the commitment not to use our stories to beat ourselves up anymore. We have to be willing to stop indulging our dramas, to stop empowering them with our attention. If you have ever practiced meditation, you've probably noticed that your mind is a constant stream of thoughts. But if you are committed to your meditation practice, you make the choice to simply observe your thoughts instead of following them wherever they are trying to lead you. With practice, what you find is that at some point, your mind realizes that you are not going to bite the hook and it gives up. It lets go, and you're just there, witnessing the workings of your inner mind. The same is true for our stories. If we don't act out our dramas, we can choose to walk away from them. The most important thing we can do to break free from our dramas is to acknowledge them as stories rather than crawling inside them, believing them to be the truth. Instead of blindly following the instructions of our shadow boxes, we can say, "Oh, thanks for that thought. Right now I am choosing a different thought." Eventually, our stories will stop replaying themselves because they can exist only when we believe we are our stories. Our stories feed off the attention we give them. I'm going to say that again. Our stories feed off the attention we give them. They will cease to have any control if there is no dialogue between us and our stories. They will cease to have any control over us. We simply make the choice to disidentify with them. We do this by declaring out loud, "Oh, here we go again. I'm in my story." It's like watching television. We can choose to walk away, even though the television is still droning on and on. The question we want to ask ourselves is, do I want to feed my story and give it my life force? Do I want to empower it with my precious energy? If our answer is yes, then by all means, we should sit down in front of our story and listen to it. But we need to do it consciously. We all have the right to indulge in our story from time to time. We might say to ourselves, "It's Tuesday afternoon at 2, I have nothing better to do. I think I'll sit down for a while and replay my personal drama." Then at least we can be responsible for what we are creating. So here are strategies for getting outside your story. There are infinite choices available to us if we choose to transcend our stories. We could go inside and have a dialogue with our story. We could free write and allow that part of us to express itself. We could say, "Excuse me, I know you want something here, but I have other things to do today." Or we could choose to talk to God. There is a saying, when you're thinking about God, you're not thinking about your problems. The vibration of our story and the vibration of our deepest self are totally opposed to one another. We cannot experience both at the same time. It's important that we identify some strategies to get outside our stories when we find that we have slipped back into them. Here are a few strategies we can use to dismantle our stories and gain access to the life that awaits us outside the limitations of our personal dramas. Ask the people who were involved in your emotional traumas to give you their version of the story. Embracing a new perspective lets us know immediately that we have identified as our story as only one version of the truth. While Debbie was writing this book, she emailed the first few chapters to her older brother, Mike, a trial consultant, to get his feedback. In his reply, he pointed out what he believed is a very important distinction. Here's what Mike said. The stories of our lives are 90% perception and 10% fact. Every person we know will view the same set of facts in a different way. In my job as a jury consultant, I listen to lawyers every day take the same collection of undisputed facts and mold these facts into stories that serve the best interests of their clients. There is little or no search for the truth. There is only a collection of arguments that will be perceived in different ways by different people. Unfortunately, in our personal lives, many of us choose to view our lives from the perspective that is least favorable to us. By doing that, we become victims with someone to blame for our misfortune. rather than taking responsibility for the portion of our fate that is a result of our own choices. Later that night, Mike called Debbie. "By the way, Debbie," he said, "I just have to tell you something. That story you wrote about your childhood, it isn't true." "What do you mean it isn't true?" I asked. "I lived it." "No, Debbie," he said. "I wanted you. I always wanted you. I was so happy to have a little sister." Shocked, Debbie asked Mike to write his version of her childhood, and this is what he wrote. Here is my version of Debbie's childhood. Born into a typical nuclear family, Debbie was adored by everyone who knew her from an early age. In every moment I have of Debbie's childhood, she was surrounded by friends who enjoyed her company. Mom filled Debbie's childhood with love and attention, taking her to dance, baton, swimming, art, and drama classes on almost a daily basis. I admired Debbie's ability to take on everything every day with enthusiasm and energy. She was never intimidated by anyone and excelled at everything I can remember. Debbie was mature beyond her years, and by age 11, she was modeling and dating older boys. She was a magnet. Everyone wanted to be Debbie's friend and to be wherever Debbie was. There wasn't anything beyond Debbie's reach. Debbie sat there flabbergasted. She was hearing a perspective she had never even conceived of. Even though she uses and embraces her story, she was floored to hear Mike's view. As you can see, asking friends and family members to give us their perspective on our lives' dramas is an effective way to dismantle the limited perspective we believe to be the truth. Transformation is a shift in perception. It is being able to see something through new eyes. Nothing works quicker to give us a new perspective than seeing the limited view of reality that we thought to be the truth through different sets of eyes. We must understand that our vision, what we can see at any given moment, is limited by our interpretations. The moment we assigned meanings to the events in our lives was the moment we limited our view of reality. Asking other people for their perspectives can reopen the lens through which we view ourselves. Rewrite your story as though you were an eternal optimist who could see only the light side of your drama. Overemphasize the good points of your story as well as the gifts you were given. How would your life look if seen through the eyes of an angel? The bottom line is that we can take our collective life experiences as a bad memory from which we cannot escape, or we can rewrite them so they provide a valuable foundation from which we can build a fulfilling future. We either learn from the lessons of our past and move forward, or dwell on them and stay stuck in the same place. Learn to recognize clearly when you have stepped back inside your story. To do this, make a list of 10 thoughts, feelings, habits, and behaviors you engage in when you are living inside your story. Then make a list of 10 thoughts, feelings, habits, and behaviors you engage in when you are living outside your story. What do you have access to when you step outside your story? Finally, make a list of 10 ways you can raise your consciousness and step back into your highest self once you've recognized that you've slipped back into your story. Debbie asked Helen, a participant in one of her coaching programs, to share her lists. And here's her list inside her story. I overeat, I drink beer, I gossip, I compare myself to others, I withhold the truth from others and allow resentments to build, I withhold sex from my husband, I enroll others in what a victim of life I am, I criticize and judge myself for everything I do, I blame my kids for my lack of joy, I lay around whining and complaining. Outside my story. I decline to gossip. I relate to people as their highest possibility. I do yoga. I express myself freely. I communicate my feelings and resolve my upsets. I am grateful for the blessings in my life. I drink alcohol very rarely and only one glass at a time. I am energetic and helpful. I set a tone of positive energy for my entire household. I enjoy food but do not use it as an escape from feeling my emotions. Things I could do to step outside of my story. meditate for at least 15 minutes, go for a brisk walk, garden, beautify my environment, get down on the floor and play with my kids, read an inspirational book, journal until I reach some deeper understanding, call someone whose opinion of me I value, give to someone else, do yoga, feel gratitude for the many blessings of my life. Use the following quiz to support yourself in staying out of your story. You can tell by the way you feel about yourself and others by how clearly you see things and by how you are interpreting your life's events, whether you are living inside or outside your personal drama. Decide whether each of the following statements is true or false. I feel like my needs aren't being met. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I'm trying, but I just don't get it. Other people are the cause of my problems. I find myself thinking, if only I had more, fill in the blank. If I had the same internal dialogue for more than 2 weeks. I believe I don't have a story. I am engaged in more than one behavior that I know makes me feel bad about myself. I've called at least one other person this week to enroll them in my pity party. If you have answered true to more than 4 of these statements, you are deeply inside your story. Do not move on without making a commitment to step outside your story. It's important to monitor ourselves and bring conscious awareness to our everyday lives. It's a sad day when we wake up one morning and realize we've been in our story for the past 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years. By asking ourselves on a daily basis, am I in or out? We bring the light of our awareness to what has previously been hidden in the shadows. If you're one of those diehards who find it difficult to let go of your limited self, I recommend that you stand in front of a mirror and repeat your poor me story to yourself word for word until you're so sick of it that you can't bear to repeat it one more time. You'll know that you have succeeded in this exercise if you feel sick in your stomach. However, if you're still not cured, I recommend that you go to a coffee shop and share your story with 5 strangers. All you have to do is start walking up to people who are sitting alone and say, I have a great story. Would you like to hear it? Eventually, you'll find someone who is happy to oblige. Then launch into your sad tale and really get into it. Tell them why and how things have turned out for you the way they have. Show them how nicely a good drama goes with a latte and a baguette. If you still feel attached to the drama of your story, go back to the hospital, go back to the coffee shop, that's so funny, and ask 5 strangers to tell you their stories. By the time you should be very, very clear, what we're talking about here is a story, and it's only a story and nothing but a story. If none of the previous exercises has worked, you can always try a good old-fashioned death ceremony. We did this with Debbie. Pretend that you have passed on, and someone you love is going to stand up at your funeral and pay tribute to the life you lived inside your story. Write the eulogy that person will give at your funeral. After you read it, ask yourself, is this what I am committed to being remembered as? I asked my girlfriend Colleen to write her eulogy. Here is what she wrote. Colleen was a very bright girl with a lot of potential. Even though she had a rough start in the beginning of her life, she forged ahead, determined to make something of herself. For some unknown reason, she always attracted the wrong jobs, worked for the wrong people, and she certainly never got paid what she was worth. Always there was someone who was preventing her from letting her light shine. If only she had a break, if only she had different parents or a better education, if only her talents had been discovered. But instead, Colleen kept waiting for that one day when she would be ready to make her mark on the world. But as we sit here today, we can see that Colleen never did get that opportunity. Let's all join together in prayer and say, poor Colleen, may she and her story rest in peace. After you write the eulogy of your story, share it with some friends, have a little ceremony, get some flowers and some food, and lay it to rest. At every moment, you've got to be willing to step outside your story. You must be willing to sacrifice who you know yourself to be for who you can become. You must be willing to give up the smallness of your story for the vastness of your true essence. Every moment, you have a choice. The contemplation of this chapter, are you in, are you out, is, outside my story, I am an amazing contribution to the world. And so you get to be when you use everything inside your story to be a contribution and know that there's no accidents and put all the pieces of your story together so you have the power to step outside of it.